Chapter 19. The Mansion's Secret. Branches of the sausage tree broke from the leopard's weight. They crashed to the ground, together with several of the hard 12-inch melons. Screaming, Bess dashed toward the Webster house. She kept urging the others to follow her. "Run! Run!" Longman, on the other side of the high fence, seemed stunned for a couple of seconds. Then he cried out, "Catch this and slash that beast!" He tossed the whip to the boys. Nancy, to avoid being recognized by the animal trainer, turned and ran to the house. In the meantime, Bert and Dave had each grabbed a broken branch with the heavy sausage-shaped fruit and were ready to ward off the animal if he should attack. As Ned caught the whip, he yelled to Nancy and George, "Open the garage door! We'll chase the leopard in there!" This was easier said than done. At first, the leopard refused to come down from the tree. Then, responding to Longman's commands, he made a great leap toward the fence, but missed it and dropped to the ground. Ned cracked the whip in the air and on the ground. The beast started to make another leap, then stopped. Lowering his head, he looked balefully at Bert and Dave and crouched as if about to spring at them. The two boys waved their tree branch clubs in the air. By now the leopard was thoroughly confused. With Ned working the whip and his friends flourishing their fruit-laden branches, the frightened beast was finally driven into the garage. Quickly, George and Nancy yanked down the door. Inside, the leopard set up a fearful racket. Above the loud snarls, the young people heard Longman call, "Keep him there! I'll get my van!" While they were waiting for the trainer to come, an idea suddenly came to Nancy. She said to Ned, "This is our chance to get into the basement of the moss-covered mansion and find out what's behind the steel door. Will you go with me?" Ned's eyes opened wide in amazement. "You mean ride in the van with the leopard?" "Of course not," Nancy answered. "After the animal is inside and Longman is in the driver's seat, you and I can quickly climb up to the roof of the van and lie flat. He won't know we're there, and we can get off before he opens the van door." Ned replied, "You know you're taking a terrible chance, Nancy, but I'm game to go with you." To the surprise of everyone, Bess came speeding up the driveway in their car. They had assumed she was in the house. She jumped out and said excitedly, "I brought some meat with a tranquilizer in it." "You what?" George asked. Bess explained that she had noticed a doctor's sign on a house in the next block. She had driven over there and explained to him what had happened. He could not come himself, but had given her the chunk of raw meat with a tranquilizer pill embedded in it. The others stared at her in amazement. Finally, Nancy said, "That's wonderful, Bess. It was quick thinking." Dave took the chunk of meat. As the others carefully lifted the garage door a couple of inches, he poked the food inside. Then the door was shut tight again. The enraged animal apparently sniffed at the meat, then ate it, because for a few moments there was silence. Again he began to howl objections, but this time they did not last long. "Bess, you're the heroine of the occasion," George told her cousin. She grinned. "And you know I don't say that often." The others laughed, heaving sighs of relief. When they saw Longman's van coming, Nancy and Ned moved to another side of the house, so she would not be seen by the animal trainer. Bess and George followed. As he jumped down, Bert told him that they had tranquilized his leopard. He looked at the boy disbelievingly. "How?" he asked. Bert explained what Bess had done. "That tranquilizer should keep your animal quiet for a while." "Very good." Longman looked around and asked, "Where are your friends?" No one answered his question, but Dave said quickly, "Let's get to work. You'd better move the leopard to your place before the tranquilizer wears off." "That's right," said Longman, and opened the rear door of his van. The young people saw that a cage had been fitted inside. Longman opened the gate to it. Bert and Dave rolled up the garage door gradually, in case the leopard was not asleep as they thought. This precaution was unnecessary, for the beast lay peacefully on the floor. It took the combined strength of Longman and the two boys to lift the leopard into the van. Then the cage gate and the van door were locked. Then the animal trainer murmured something that sounded like "thanks" and swung himself up into the driver's seat. Instantly, Nancy and Ned came from hiding. In a jiffy, they had climbed to the van's roof and lay face down. By holding onto each other with one hand and grabbing bars along the sides with the other, the couple felt reasonably secure. Silently, their friends watched them leave, hoping for safety and success. Fortunately, there was no one on the road to observe the two stowaways. The van turned into the grounds of the moss-covered mansion. When it reached the fence at the house, Longman got down and unlocked a gate. Then he drove through. The gate swung shut and locked itself. Nancy saw a clump of bushes which would make a good hiding place. She whispered to Ned, "Here's where we get off." The van was going so slowly toward the animal cages that the couple accomplished this easily without being injured. Instantly, they dodged behind some bushes. After Longman had unloaded the leopard, he secured the beast's cage with a double lock. Then he drove off. "Now what?" Ned asked Nancy. "I'm sure there's an outside entrance to the basement," she said. "Let's see if we can get in." Luck was with them. They found a narrow door on the opposite side of the house. It was unlocked. "Someone may be in there," Ned cautioned in a whisper. "Let me go first." Carefully, he pushed the door open. It made no sound. The couple stepped inside. They were in the large basement room where Nancy had come with Inspector Wilcox. The first thing she noticed was that all the debris had been moved away from the walls. Several doors were revealed. On tiptoe, she and Ned walked toward the first one, and Ned opened it. The place was well lighted, and before them was a swimming pool filled with steaming, boiling water. Nancy and Ned looked questioningly at each other. What was the pool used for? They wondered. Ned quickly closed the door. They moved to the steel door where the load of furniture had fallen on Nancy 2 days earlier. In the room beyond, also well lighted, was an amazing laboratory. A complicated-looking machine with a dish-shaped parabolic reflector stood in the center of the floor. It faced the outside wall, which was made of glass building blocks. "What is it?" Nancy whispered. Ned walked around the machine, squinting at the various parts. He came back to Nancy and said, "Unless I'm all wrong, it's a very powerful transmitting antenna, a beamer." "You mean some kind of signal is sent out from down here?" Nancy asked. "Yes," Ned replied. "The telescope you told me about that's in the tower may act as a sighting device. It could locate the exact bearing and elevation of an object to be destroyed by the beamer." Nancy was horrified. The telescope was aimed directly at the rocket scheduled for liftoff the next morning. She also thought about Anton's phone message regarding our day. Instead of meaning Ruth, it could have referred to Rocket Day. "Ned," she said quickly, "would you know how to deactivate this machine?" "I can try," he said, "but Fortin would have time to fix it before the launch." "Meanwhile, we could send the police here," Nancy told him. Ned found some tools on a workbench near a series of wall cabinets. He worked with the tools for several minutes. Presently, she and Ned heard voices. To their amazement, they were coming through a loudspeaker in the ceiling. While listening, Nancy felt that no doubt Fortin, if it was necessary, could barricade himself at the laboratory and listen to conversations taking place upstairs. It would be a means of finding out how trustworthy his fellow conspirators were. The couple recognized two voices as those of the tear gas assailants at the Space Center. Nancy and Ned learned that Fortin was a clever and well-known scientist who had once been connected with NASA. He had become imbued with the ideology of a foreign power and was now using an assumed name. He had entered into a conspiracy to undermine the U.S. space program and had agreed to cause great damage to the center and to wreck the moon rocket. To accomplish this, he had a spy working with the men in top-secret procedures. From this traitor, Fortin had obtained the secret signals for the exact frequency and modulation for liftoff. In this way, he could set his beamer to destroy the rocket. Nancy whispered tensely to Ned, "He'll be murdering the astronauts." Just then, Fortin spoke up. "Scarlet," he said, "I'm paying you off, but not so much as I promised if you had done a good job." Scarlet whined. "I did the best I could. I discouraged people from looking at the Webster house, but when Nancy Drew arrived, she was determined to see it. I pretended to go on vacation, but she found me. I flooded the place to keep the Drews away, but she discovered it in time to avert any great damage." "That's enough," said Fortin. "Ivinson, you certainly bungled that explosive orange deal. You were supposed to put those oranges around in strategic spots, so the liftoff would be delayed until my beamer was perfected. Luckily, I have it ready in time." Ivinson said belligerently, "You don't know what it feels like passing yourself off as somebody else, even if I look like him. Fortunately, they didn't examine the oranges while I was there. I guess Billington delivers lots of oranges to the base, and since I had his truck, they must have thought the delivery was all right. I had no chance to drive around, though. A guard got aboard and directed me to the Space Center food supply depot and made me leave the sacks there." "Here's your money," said Fortin. "Get out of here and never let me see you again." A younger voice spoke. "Dad, I want to leave and go far away. I'm through." Fortin laughed. "You couldn't take care of yourself, son. You haven't been able to hold a job. I kept you away from here and even forbade phone calls so you wouldn't be involved if anything went wrong. You did think up that great father-son code, but that backfired. We don't know yet who figured it out. But you came here to hide in case it was the FBI." Young Fortin was not to be put down so easily. "If you expect me to stay, you've got to get rid of every one of those wild animals. You know they scare me to death." Longman shot back. "We need those wild animals here to protect us." "What's the latest news on Anton?" Fortin asked. His son replied that a newscast had reported both the Rosardos were in jail. "What?" the scientist shouted. "There's no telling what they'll say to the authorities." "I can assure you," said one of the tear gas attackers, "they won't talk. I made it pretty plain that if they ever did, their lives wouldn't be worth a nickel. And don't forget, boss, the Rosardos did some good work. They stole those photographs and passed them around to us so we'd recognize Mr. Drew and the girls and their boyfriends. Anton found out where they were going so we could watch them. Stevie here and I fooled them completely at the vehicle assembly building and knocked them out with tear gas." During the ensuing conversation, Nancy and Ned learned that it was Max Ivinson who had started the fires in the Billington Grove. "Another stupid idea," complained Fortin. Ivinson defended his actions. "I thought Drew would get scared and send his daughter and her friends home, but nothing shakes that bunch loose." Scarlett grumbled. "Until Nancy Drew came along, we had the charge of the explosive oranges pinned neatly on Billington." Nancy whispered to Ned, "I think we'd better go before some of those men come down here. Besides, we should notify the authorities at once." The two tiptoed to the door through which they had entered. They were taken aback when the huge form of Longman appeared in the opening. "You!" he cried, and reached up to push a button on the wall. An alarm sounded upstairs. "Let us out!" Ned demanded. The towering Longman looked at the couple in amusement. "We have a special treatment for snoopers." Nancy and Ned tried to break past him, but his huge, powerful body blocked the doorway like a stone wall. Within seconds, footsteps pounded down the stairway from the kitchen. Thornton appeared, leading the rest of his gang. He glared at Nancy. "So you finally found out my secret, but you won't have a chance to tell anyone else. Ivanson, you and Stevie take these young detectives," he sneered, "and put them in the room with the steaming pool." End of chapter 19.